Hey everyone, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive, and today we're tackling the future of farming.
With agroecology as our guide.
Exactly. We'll be using this handbook called Introduction to Agroecology to explore how farming can actually be a solution to global issues.
Not a contributor.
Right. So have you ever wondered how your food choices connect to the planet's health?
Well, we're going to find out. This handbook dives deep into both the future of agroecology
The challenge is the opportunity.
and how farmers are at the heart of creating a greener, more sustainable tomorrow.
Okay, so first things first. What exactly are we talking about when we say agroecology?
You know, it's interesting. This handbook really emphasizes that agroecology is more than just a trendy term for organic farming.
It's a whole system.
Exactly. It's a science, a set of practices, and a social movement all wrapped up in one,
So it's not just about what we eat.
but the whole system behind it.
Got it. Now, the handbook also takes us on a little journey through the evolution of agroecology.
Yeah, and you know what's fascinating? For centuries, farmers were practicing agroecology without even knowing the word. It was
Unreal.
just common sense. Think about those traditional techniques, like crop rotation or intercropping or using natural fertilizers
It's like we're rediscovering ancient wisdom.
and combining it with modern science.
Okay, but why is agroecology having this big moment, NOW?
Well, this handbook makes a really compelling case for why it's relevant to all of us today. It highlights how agroecology tackles multiple sustainable development goals.
SDGs.
All at once. We're talking about hunger, climate change, clean water, the whole shebang.
So it's like a multi-pronged solution.
Exactly. Imagine a world where farming, actually H or LPS, fight climate change instead of making it worse.
That's pretty powerful. Now, the handbook doesn't shy away from the challenges either.
Oh, absolutely. There are hurdles.
Like what?
Well, the economic side of things is a big one. Many farmers worry about those lower yields during the transition to agroecological practices.
Right, because if farmers can't make a living, then the whole system falls apart.
Exactly. And that's why the handbook suggests some solutions. Targeted government incentives for one.
Like what kind of incentives?
We're talking about things like carbon credits for farms that sequester carbon in the soil.
So actually rewarding farmers for being good stewards of the land.
Right. And payments for those ecosystem services like providing clean water and biodiversity.
It's about valuing those things that often get overlooked.
And even tax breaks for adopting sustainable practices.
Makes sense. Now, all of this makes me think about us as consumers, too.
Absolutely. We have a role to play.
Are we willing to pay a bit more for food that aligns with our values?
That's the question the handbook poses.
It's not just about taste or price. It's about supporting a system that benefits both people and the planet.
Right. Consumers are becoming more aware of the true cost of food, but there's still work to do in educating people about the benefits of agroecology.
So smarter policies
Yeah.
and smarter shopping choices.
Both key to making this happen.
Okay, so we've talked about the system as a whole. But what about the farmers themselves? Where do they fit into all of this?
The handbook really puts farmers at the center of this movement. It argues that farmers need to be more than just food producers,
They need to be innovators, problem solvers.
and even community leaders.
That's a pretty different picture than what a lot of people might imagine when they think farmer.
Yeah, it challenges that traditional image.
But the handbook also makes it clear that farmers need support to make this happen.
Of course. We can't just romanticize the struggles of small-scale farmers.
Right. We need to provide them with the tools and the resources and the knowledge to be successful.
Exactly. Access to land and water.
Training in those agroecological techniques.
And getting fair compensation for their work.
So it's not enough to just say farmers are heroes.
We need to back that up with real support.
Now, speaking of support, the handbook talks about the role of agricultural advisors.
Ah, yes, those advisors are key.
They're the bridge between the science and what's actually happening out in the fields.
Right. Helping farmers understand those principles of agroecology, implement new techniques, and troubleshoot any challenges that come up.
So it's a pretty vital partnership.
Absolutely. Farmers are the experts on their land.
But they also need access to the latest scientific insights.
And that's where those advisors come in. The handbook specifically talks about the success of farmer field schools.
Where farmers learn from each other.
It's all about empowering farmers to be active participants in the research and development process.
It's not about scientists telling farmers what to do.
It's about sharing knowledge and co-creating solutions.
That's a pretty powerful idea. Okay, so we've touched on some of those big challenges facing agroecology.
But this handbook is packed with real-world examples of how it's already making a difference.
So let's dive into those case studies and see how this all plays out in practice.
Let's do it. All right, so we're back. And we left off talking about how agroecology can actually address some of those big global challenges.
Yeah, we were getting into the nitty-gritty of how it can tackle things like climate change and biodiversity loss.
Right. And this handbook isn't just all talk. It's packed with case studies.
Real-world examples of how agroecology is already making a difference.
Exactly. And one that really stood out to me was the story of Sikkim in India.
Oh, yeah, Sikkim. They went fully organic back in 2016, right?
Yep. The first state in the world to do so.
That's a pretty bold move for an entire state.
It was. And the handbook details some pretty incredible outcomes.
Like what?
Well, not only did they see those environmental benefits you'd expect, like reduced pollution and increased biodiversity,
Makes sense.
but get this, the farmers actually saw a rise in their incomes.
Wait, so going organic actually boosted their profits?
It did. And that goes against what a lot of people think about organic farming being less productive and more expensive.
Yeah, you always hear about how much more expensive organic food is.
Right. But the Sikkim case shows that with the right support and market access, organic farming can be economically viable.
And even more profitable.
Exactly. And the key was empowering farmers with the knowledge and training they needed to make that transition.
So it wasn't just a top-down government mandate.
Nope. It was a collaboration between the government and the farmers.
Working together.
And it highlights another crucial piece of the puzzle: consumer demand.
Because if no one's buying those organic products, then it doesn't really matter how well the farmers are doing.
Exactly. But Sikkim's organic products found a strong market both domestically and internationally.
So people are willing to pay for food that aligns with their values.
It seems so.
So it sounds like Sikkim created this really cool cycle where sustainable farming practices, government support, and consumer demand all work together.
They did. And this theme of community empowerment runs through a lot of these other case studies, too.
Like the Campesino movement in Latin America.
That's a great example. Farmers teaching other farmers.
Sharing that knowledge.
And it's spread throughout Latin America, empowering those rural communities to take control of their food systems.
And become more resilient in the face of climate change.
Exactly.
I've always thought it's so cool how those kinds of farmer-to-farmer networks can be even more effective than top-down approaches.
Because it's based on experience.
Real-world experience.
And the handbook makes that point, too. These farmers are sharing techniques that have actually worked for them.
In their specific regions?
It's all about adapting those agroecological principles to the local context.
But let's be real. Not every transition is going to be a smooth ride.
Definitely not. The handbook acknowledges that there are challenges.
What kind of challenges came up in these case studies?
Well, one that popped up a few times was that initial dip in yields.
Ah, yeah. When farmers first switch over to agroecological practices.
It takes time for the soil to regenerate.
For that whole ecosystem to find a new balance.
And that transition can be tough financially.
Especially for farmers who are already struggling.
Right, which is why the handbook emphasizes that it can't just be about changing farming practices.
We need those supportive policies.
Access to markets that value sustainable products.
And a shift in consumer behavior.
It's a systemic problem.
Needing systemic solutions.
Now, one case that really highlights that is the Machakos district in Kenya.
They actually managed to reverse land degradation through agroecology.
Right, they did. And it's a pretty remarkable story.
How did they pull that off?
Well, they combined techniques like agroforestry, terracing, and water conservation.
And turned a barren landscape into a thriving agricultural region.
And what's so inspiring about it is that this transformation was driven by the community.
It wasn't some big government project.
It was the farmers working together, sharing knowledge and supporting each other.
Wow, that gives me hope.
It should. It shows what's possible.
So we've seen how agroecology is being put into practice.
But what about the big picture?
Yeah, what does the handbook say about the future of farming on a global scale?
Well, it argues that agroecology is the future of farming. If we're serious about creating a sustainable and equitable food system.
But there are some serious obstacles in the way.
No doubt.
How do we scale up agroecology to feed a growing global population?
That is the million-dollar question. And the handbook offers a few insights. First, we need to invest in research and development.
Because agroecology isn't static. It's constantly evolving.
Exactly. We need to be refining those techniques, making them more efficient and more productive.
Blending the best of traditional knowledge with those latest scientific advancements.
Right. It's not about romanticizing the past. It's about using all the tools we have to create a food system that works.
But we also have to change the way we think about food.
We can't keep prioritizing quantity over quality.
Cheapness over nutrition?
Profit over people and the planet.
That's a major shift in mindset.
But it's a necessary one.
What else does the handbook suggest?
Policy.
Oh, yeah.
A T word. We need governments to create policies that actually support agroecology,
Not just talk about it.
but put it into action.
What would those policies look like?
Well, for one, redirecting those agricultural subsidies,
Because right now, a lot of them are going towards industrial agriculture.
which often promotes practices that harm the environment.
So we need to shift those subsidies to support those small-scale agroecological farms.
Level the playing field.
What else?
Policies that protect farmland from development.
So we don't lose even more valuable agricultural land,
Right. And policies that incentivize sustainable practices.
like cover cropping and crop rotation.
And policies that ensure fair prices for farmers.
It's about creating a system where agroecology is the norm.
Not the exception.
Those are some big changes.
They are, but they're necessary.
If we want to tackle those interconnected challenges of climate change, biodiversity loss, and food insecurity,
And while policy is crucial, the handbook doesn't forget about individual action.
what can we do as individuals?
Vote with your dollars.
Support those businesses and farmers who are committed to sustainability.
Shop at local farmers markets.
Look for those certifications, like organic or fair trade.
And be willing to pay a bit more for food that's produced ethically.
It's about being mindful of those choices.
And understanding that every purchase is a vote for the kind of food system we want.
So we're not just consumers, we're citizens.
And we can advocate for change. Talk to your friends and family about agroecology.
Support organizations working for food system reform.
And reach out to your elected officials to voice your support for those policies.
So it's about taking action on multiple fronts.
From individual choices to collective advocacy.
And that makes me feel hopeful knowing that we all have a role to play.
We do. And the handbook goes even further. It emphasizes the importance of collaboration.
Because agroecology thrives on collaboration.
It does. We need farmers, scientists, policymakers, consumers, everyone working together.
To create a food system that benefits us all.
How does that actually work in practice, though?
Yeah, are there examples of successful partnerships in the handbook?
Tons. You see farmer researcher partnerships where scientists and farmers work together to develop and test new agroecological techniques.
Combining that scientific knowledge with practical experience.
Exactly. And there are these amazing international networks focused on agroecology.
Sharing knowledge across borders.
It's a global community working towards a more sustainable future.
I'd love to hear more about those.
Yeah, let's explore some of those key players and their contributions to the movement in our next segment.
Sounds good. I'm ready to learn more about those folks who are leading the charge. Okay, so we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into this whole world of agroecology.
And I feel like we've just scratched the surface. This handbook is jam-packed with information.
We've talked about the principles,
Yeah.
the practices,
The challenges.
the incredible potential
And we've seen how it's already making a difference.
from that fully organic state of Sikkim.
To those inspiring farmer-to-farmer networks,
But as we come to a close here, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
for me, it's that sense of hope that agroecology offers. This idea that it's not just a set of practices,
It's a vision
of a future where food production actually works with nature.
where farmers are respected
Valued.
and where communities have the power to decide what their food systems look like.
It's a vision that feels both urgent and achievable.
Yeah, it's grounded in those real-world examples.
And backed by science.
And this handbook really drives that point home. Agroecology isn't some far-off dream,
It's happening now.
and it has the potential to transform how we feed the world.
But as we've discussed, it's not a quick fix.
This transition is going to take time,
The effort,
commitment,
innovation,
and a willingness to challenge how things are done.
and it takes all of us.
Every single one of us.
Whether we're supporting our local farmers,
Advocating for better policies.
or we're just being more mindful about the food we choose.
Every action matters.
It all adds up.
We have the power to create the future we want.
So for our listeners who are ready to take that next step,
And really dive into this world of agroecology.
what resources would you recommend?
Well, the handbook itself is a great starting point.
It has a whole section on further resources.
Books, articles, websites, organizations.
And don't be afraid to reach out. Connect with those networks. See what's happening in your community.
Agroecology isn't just something you read about.
It's something you experience.
So there you have it, folks.
Our deep dive into the future of farming with agroecology as our guide.
We hope you're leaving today feeling informed, inspired, and ready to make a difference.
Because the future of food is in our hands.
Let's choose a path that nourishes us all.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.